The ancient light fixtures flickered above the cavernous classroom, as if they too were struggling to stay awake through another history lecture. Arelys, a woman whose patience was only rivaled by her sarcasm, stood at the front, staring at the assorted group of alien students with the enthusiasm of a cat at a dog show. "All right, you lot," she declared, slapping a palm against the holographic board. The hologram dutifully blinked to life, projecting scenes of Earth's weirder, wilder days. "Before we get to the part where you ask, why didn't you just blast it with a death ray, let's talk about why humanity is still here, despite our best efforts to the contrary." Her audience comprised a motley crew of alien teenagers, each more bewildered by Earth's past than the last. There was Thrax, who resembled a sentient pile of moss with a penchant for existential dread, and Xylara, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, but had no choice because apparently her parents thought human history was a character-building exercise. "I still don't get why you guys didn't just leave the planet when it got messy," Xylara interrupted, her antennae twitching with genuine curiosity. "I mean, the way you describe it, Earth sounds like a death trap." Arelys grinned, a flash of teeth that promised mischief. "Oh, believe me, it was, still is. But that's the charm of it, isn't it? It's like a really bad movie you can't stop watching. Besides, leaving would mean admitting defeat, and if there's one thing humans are known for, it's their stubborn refusal to admit they are wrong." Thrax raised a leafy appendage. "But this rogue planet, it's not just some bad weather or invading army. How do you plan to survive that?" Arelys sighed theatrically. "Good question, Thrax. We're still working on our bury heads in sand technique, but if that doesn't pan out, we're considering a more proactive approach. Maybe we'll ask the planet nicely to go around us." Jokes aside, the rogue planet was no laughing matter. Detected only a week ago, it was hurtling through space with all the grace of a drunk teenager in a hover car. The experts said it might miss Earth. Might. The same way you might miss a brick wall if you drive with your eyes closed. "But seriously," Arelys continued, "humans have this knack for survival that borders on the miraculous. It's why you're all studying here instead of, I don't know, a nice, safe orbital station." Xylara groaned. Yeah, humans are amazing, they never give up. But what happens if this planet doesn't play nice?" "Then we improvise," Arelys replied, tapping on the board to bring up a graphic of Earth with a dangerously close neighbor. "Which, honestly, is another human specialty. When life gives us lemons, we throw them back and demand something edible." Her attempt at levity did little to calm the nervous shifting among the students. They weren't buying it, not entirely, and why should they? It wasn't every day a rogue planet threatened to crash the cosmic party of existence. "But aren't you scared?" Thrax pressed, his voice a curious mixture of dread and fascination. Arelys leaned against her desk, folding her arms with a casual indifference that was only half faked. "Scared? No, terrified, getting warmer. But fear's a funny thing. It either paralyzes you or makes you do something incredibly stupid. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the stupid thing actually works out." Outside the classroom, the secret city buzzed with its own nervous energy. Built under the Pacific, it was humanity's insurance policy, a backup plan in case life topside became untenable. Not exactly utopia, but then, utopias for dreamers. Realists like Arelys knew perfection was just a stepping stone to disappointment. "So tell us, teacher," Xylara challenged, her tone dripping with teenage skepticism. "What's the plan if that big ball of doom decides it wants to tango?" Arelys shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eye. "I hear there's a pretty good bar at the end of the world. Might swing by, have a drink, and toast to the end of civilization as we know it." The class erupted in laughter, more nervous than genuine, but it broke the tension like a much-needed release valve. "All joking aside," Arelys said, her tone shifting to something a shade more serious, "we don't have all the answers yet. But that's the thing about humans, you can push us to the brink and we'll still find a way to spit in fate's eye." Thrax leaned forward, curiosity getting the better of his unease. "And if you don't?" Aralise grinned again, a touch of madness in her eyes. Then we go out with a bang so loud, the universe will still be talking about it eons later. The students left the classroom contemplating whether humans were brave, insane, or some combination of the two. Aralise watched them file out, a small, satisfied smile tugging at her lips. Teaching aliens about human history was like trying to explain a joke in a language they didn't speak, but she figured she was doing all right. And really, what else could anyone do in the face of impending doom? Besides, Aralise thought as she powered down the hologram, if it all went south, at least she wouldn't have to grade any more papers. Aralise wandered into the maze of tunnels that made up the city, each step echoing the weight of 10,000 anxious hearts. The lights above flickered in a nervous rhythm, the subterranean pulse of a world holding its breath. She made her way to the mess hall where the air was thick with the smell of overcooked rations and undercooked gossip. The usual suspects were gathered around a table, exchanging the latest rumors and what-if scenarios. "Heard anything new, Aralise?" asked Lark, a fellow teacher who'd once been voted most likely to survive the apocalypse because of her impressive survival skills and general disdain for other people. Aralise grabbed a cup of something resembling coffee and slumped into a chair. "Nah, just the usual we're all doomed, but don't panic spiel." "Ah, the old optimism routine," Lark replied with a smirk, "like putting a bow on a grenade." "Exactly," Aralise said, sipping her drink and grimacing as it hit her taste buds like a sledgehammer. "I keep telling them we should just start an end-of-the-world band. You know, go out in style. With our luck, the planet would probably hate our music and leave," Lark quipped. The two laughed, the sound more defiant than cheerful. Laughter, after all, was one of the few things left that the universe hadn't found a way to ruin. The hum of conversation around them was a comforting reminder that they weren't alone in this existential circus act, even if their trapeze was on fire and the safety net was made of dreams. "You think we'll make it?" Lark asked, her voice dropping to a whisper as if to avoid tempting fate. Aralise leaned back, eyes scanning the tired, hopeful faces around her. "Honestly, if there's one thing history's taught me, it's that humans are like cockroaches, hardy, resilient, and really hard to get rid of," Lark smirked. "So there's hope then." "Hope," Aralise chuckled. "Hope's for the optimistic. We've got stubbornness, and right now that'll have to do." The announcement system crackled to life, interrupting their darkly optimistic musings. "Attention, all residents. Please report to the briefing center for an update on the rogue planet situation." Aralise exchanged a glance with Lark, both of them caught in the same mix of dread and curiosity. "Well," Aralise said, standing up with exaggerated enthusiasm, "I guess we're about to find out just how doomed we are." The trek to the briefing center was a shared exercise in grim determination. People clustered in groups, voices hushed with the anticipation of bad news. The center was a stark amphitheater, seats filling quickly as residents poured in, each face a canvas of tired resilience. The lights dimmed, signaling the start of the briefing, a formality that felt almost theatrical given the circumstances. Dr. Mallory, a scientist with all the charisma of a damp napkin, took the podium. Her voice was steady, a practiced neutrality that made her one of the least hated people in the city. "I'll keep this short," she began, activating a hologram that filled the room with the image of the rogue planet, a massive, indifferent traveler in the vastness of space. "The good news," she continued, "is that our calculations suggest the planet will pass by the Earth, close enough to shave us, but hopefully not close enough to cause catastrophic orbital disruptions." Aralise felt the room exhale, a collective sigh of relief that was almost palpable. "The less good news," Mallory added, "is that hopefully isn't exactly a guarantee." The tension snapped back into place, the tightrope of hope swaying dangerously. "We have teams working around the clock to monitor the situation," Mallory reassured, though the reassurance felt as thin as the air they breathed. "In the meantime, we urge everyone to continue with their daily routines." The briefing ended, leaving in its wake a mixture of relief and renewed anxiety. As the crowd dispersed, Aralise found herself standing in the echoing halls, the weight of her thoughts a familiar burden. "So, business as usual," Lark said, appearing at her side. Aralise nodded, the absurdity of their situation settling in like an old friend. "Yep, just another day in paradise." They walked back through the maze of tunnels, the city a constant hum of life and quiet desperation. "You know," Aralise mused, "if we do make it through this, maybe I'll finally write that book about human history. Call it How to Survive the End of the World Without Really Trying," Lark suggested with a grin. Aralise laughed, the sound echoing through the corridor like a defiant anthem. "Perfect. And if we don't make it, at least I won't have to deal with writer's block." And so, beneath the waves and the weight of the cosmos, they carried on, stubborn and irreverent as ever, ready to face whatever the universe decided to throw their way next. Aralise stalked back into the classroom with the swagger of someone who knew they were about to deal with something that was equal parts amusing and frustrating. The students were already there, a mix of curious aliens and a few weary humans, all seated in a lazy semicircle facing the holographic board. The class was a motley collection of beings with too many eyes, not enough limbs, or in Thrax's case, an abundance of existential dread. "All right, motley crew, settle down," Aralise commanded, slapping a palm against the side of her console. The holographic board flickered to life, a disobedient old dog reluctantly waking from a nap. "Today we're talking about the great human art of perseverance." Thrax's mossy form quivered slightly, like a particularly anxious shrub. "Is this the part where you tell us how you humans always survive by sheer dumb luck?" Aralise smirked. "Luck's nice, but we prefer to call it strategic improvisation. Like when we discovered penicillin because some poor bloke couldn't clean his lab properly." Zylara rolled her eyes, her bluish scales catching the light in a way that made her look perpetually unimpressed. "So, just making stuff up as you go along, pretty much," Aralise said, magnifying an old video clip of Earth's surface on the hologram. "See, back when the first humans set out to map the world, they didn't have all the facts. They just went for it with a handful of nuts, a few questionable maps, and the hope they didn't fall off the edge, asked a four-armed student whose name Aralise had yet to master. "You thought your planet was flat, pretty crazy, right?" Aralise nodded. "Almost as crazy as putting all your survival hopes into a secret city under the ocean." The students murmured among themselves, curiosity piqued. Aralise almost felt proud. They were starting to get it. Humans were nothing if not recklessly inventive. "All right, enough history. Let's talk about today's dilemma," Aralise said, swiping away the hologram of Earth and replacing it with a diagram of the rogue planet's trajectory. "Chances are this thing's going to pass us by. But if it doesn't, well, then we're going to see how good we really are at." "What was it, Zylara, making stuff up as you go along?" Zylara offered with a hint of a smirk. "Exactly," Aralise nodded. "That's the spirit." While the class weighed the wisdom or lack thereof in human survival tactics, Aralise noted the way Thrax seemed to lean in, absorbing every word like his mossy life depended on it. Which, considering the universal stakes, wasn't too far from the truth. "Have you ever been through something like this before?" Thrax asked, his voice a mix of awe and mild panic. "Once or twice," Aralise replied, thinking back to any number of natural disasters, economic crashes, and general human stupidity that had somehow resulted in continued existence. "It's like the universe likes to keep us on our toes. Maybe it thinks we need the exercise, but you always come out okay." Thrax pressed, his hopeful gaze almost drowned under layers of skepticism. "Define okay," Aralise said with a wry smile. "We always come out different, and sometimes that's just enough." The lesson continued with tales of human tenacity, the kind best told over a stiff drink and an ample supply of gallows humor. Tales of explorers who ventured into hostile territories, scientists who unlocked the secrets of the universe while dodging their own government's attempts to shut them down, and the odd musician who strummed a tune that united an entire generation against tyranny. As the lecture drew to a close, Aralys noticed the shift in the classroom, a sort of begrudging respect from the aliens, and a renewed sense of grim determination from the human students. Maybe, just maybe, they were starting to see the method in the madness that was human history. "All right, everyone," Aralys concluded. "I think that's enough inspiration for one day. Go out, live a little, prepare for the end of the world, whatever floats your boat." The class dispersed, leaving Aralys to her thoughts and the lingering image of the rogue planet floating menacingly on the holographic board. She powered it down with a sigh, her mind already drifting to the next challenge, getting through another briefing without resorting to tequila. The corridor outside buzzed with a mix of alien and human chatter, the kind of nervous energy that made everyone speak a little louder, laugh a little harder, as if volume could ward off impending doom. As Aralys made her way to her quarters, she was intercepted by a brusque-looking man with a military bearing and the conversational charm of a rock. Commander Graves, the kind of leader who could motivate a team with just a glare and a grunt. "Aralys," Graves began, his voice gravelly with the weight of command and 1,000 cigarettes, "we need to talk. Something tells me we're not planning a surprise birthday party," Aralys quipped, falling into step beside him. Graves grunted, "I wish." Command's getting twitchy about the rogue planet. "We're ramping up preparations. Aralys echoed, her curiosity piqued. "Evac protocols, resource stockpiling, you name it," Graves replied, eyes scanning the corridor like he expected the rogue planet itself to come barreling down. "We've got to be ready for anything. Typical bureaucracy," Aralys muttered, either over-preparing or completely ignoring the problem. Graves allowed a rare smirk. "Keeps us busy, though, and makes people feel like they're doing something." "Busy work," Aralys said with a nod, the backbone of any good doomsday scenario. As they reached the entrance to her quarters, Graves paused, a momentary flicker of uncertainty crossing his otherwise stoic face. "You're doing good work, Aralys. Those students, they're learning what it means to be human." Aralys blinked, caught off guard by the compliment. "Thanks, I think. Just doing my part to make sure we're remembered as more than just cosmic roadkill." Graves nodded, the moment of vulnerability replaced by his usual stern demeanor. "Keep it up. We're going to need every advantage we can get." With that, he turned and marched off, leaving Aralys standing alone, a mixture of pride and foreboding settling in her chest. Inside her quarters, she flopped onto her bed, the weight of the day pressing down like an unwelcome visitor. She stared up at the ceiling, tracing the faint outlines of the pipes and cables that kept their underwater world functioning. As she lay there, Aralys couldn't help but think of her students, especially Thrax and Xylara. They were learning what humans had known for centuries, that sometimes survival wasn't about strength or intelligence. Sometimes it was about sheer, unadulterated stubbornness. Her comms unit beeped, interrupting her musings. She groaned, rolling over to grab the device, half expecting another update from Graves or a reminder about a meeting she didn't want to attend. Instead, it was a message from Lark, concise as ever, "Bar. Now. Drinks on me if we're still alive tomorrow." Aralys chuckled, her spirits lifting at the prospect. After all, if they were going to face the end of the world, they might as well do it with a drink in hand and a sarcastic toast to fate. With a renewed sense of purpose, she pushed herself off the bed and headed out, ready to face whatever the universe threw her way, one irreverent comment at a time. Reaching the bar, a dimly lit enclave of questionable hygiene and even more questionable patrons, Aralys found Lark already ensconced at a table, 2 drinks in front of her. The bar was busy, a cacophony of voices and clinking glasses, the kind of place where secrets were traded and hopes were drowned. "Great timing," Lark declared, sliding one of the glasses across the sticky table. "I was just about to drink both of these myself." "Ever the altruist," Aralys replied, raising the glass in a mock toast. "To tomorrow and the hope we still have a planet to complain about." To stubborn humans and their knack for surviving their own stupidity, Lark added with a grin, clinking her glass against Aralys's. They drank, the burn of the liquor a welcome distraction from the weight of impending cosmic doom. As they settled into the comfortable rhythm of shared gallows humor and casual misanthropy, Aralys felt a sense of camaraderie that was as sustaining as any survival bunker. It was the kind of connection that reminded her why humans, against all odds, somehow found ways to adapt, endure, and even thrive. It was a reminder that even at the end of the universe, they wouldn't be facing it alone. "So what's the plan if the big ball of doom gets too close?" Lark asked, her tone light but her eyes serious. Aralys shrugged, her smile a mix of resignation and defiance. "We do what we do best. We make it up as we go along." And there, surrounded by friends and foes alike, Aralys knew that whatever happened next, they would face it head-on, irreverent and unyielding to the very end. The holographic board flickered to life like an old dog groaning awake from a nap, casting a dim glow over the classroom. Aralys stood at the front, projecting confidence like an ancient deity whose worshippers were less than impressed. Thrax and Xylara were lounging at their desks, both projecting an air of cynicism that would make a nihilist proud. "All right, kids," Aralys started, rubbing her hands together like she was about to perform a magic trick. "Today's lesson is on questionable decision-making, a subject humanity has mastered in spades." Thrax's mossy face twisted up in what might have been a smile. "Is this where we learn how to improvise our way out of an apocalypse?" Aralys grinned. "That's exactly it. You see, making it up as you go along isn't just a survival tactic. It's practically an art form where I come from." Xylara's bluish scales shimmered in the dim light as she leaned back in her seat, crossing her arms with palpable skepticism. "Isn't that just a fancy way of saying you don't plan anything?" "Oh, we plan," Aralys assured her. "We just don't let those plans get in the way of reality." The murmurs of conversation that followed had a rebellious undercurrent, the students starting to question not just human decision-making, but their own leaders' choices. It was the type of intellectual mutiny that could only happen when a classroom was fueled by existential dread and the promise of impending doom. Aralys wasn't just leading a class, she was stoking a fire, watching as the students began to consider their own societies with the same critical eye they'd turned on the humans. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. As the lesson continued, her comm beeped, a sharp, intrusive sound that cut through her train of thought like an unwelcome commercial break. Aralys glanced at it, half expecting another dire warning or a reminder about some bureaucratic nonsense she was due to attend. Instead, the message was from Commander Graves. "Meeting. Now. Bring the existential crisis." "Looks like I'll have to cut this existential circus short," Aralys announced, earning a few disappointed groans. "Keep up the good work. Question everything. Especially authority." Thrax, always quick with a question, raised a mossy hand. "What if our own leaders are wrong?" Aralys paused, meeting his gaze with an intensity that belied her casual tone. "Then you do what we did. Make it up as you go along and hope for the best." The students filed out, leaving Aralys to her thoughts and the flickering holographic board, now displaying an image of the rogue planet, looking for all the world like an angry red bruise on the universe. Asterisk, 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 the meeting room was stark, utilitarian, and devoid of anything that might distract from the grim business at hand. Graves stood at the head of the table, looking every bit the hardened military man who'd seen enough cosmic horrors to fill a lifetime of nightmares. "Aralys," he greeted with a nod as she slipped into a chair, the other occupants already watching her with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for a potential mutineer. "Commander," she replied, flashing a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "What's the issue today?" "More doomsday prep, more like damage control," Graves grunted, gesturing to a holographic display showing various points of unrest across the station. "Your students are stirring things up," Aralys glanced at the map, seeing the clusters of dissent like glowing embers threatening to ignite. They're starting to question the status quo. Imagine my surprise. Questioning is one thing, Graves said, his voice like gravel. Instigating a rebellion is another. Aralys leaned back, crossing her arms over her chest. I just told them to think for themselves. If that leads to rebellion, then maybe their leaders should be worried. A low murmur of agreement ran through the room, though it was clear not everyone was on her side. The tension was palpable, a coiled spring ready to unleash chaos at the slightest provocation. Look, Aralys continued, we're facing a rogue planet that might wipe us out. This isn't the time for blind obedience. It's the time for critical thinking and a little improvisation. Graves gave her a look that was both exasperated and grudgingly respectful. You're playing a dangerous game. Aralys shrugged. Danger's all part of the fun, right? The meeting dissolved into a series of logistical debates and bureaucratic squabbling, the kind of discussions that made Aralys long for a stiff drink and a dark corner to hide in. She scribbled notes, occasionally throwing in a sarcastic remark just to keep things interesting. Finally, as the meeting wrapped up, Graves pulled her aside. Watch yourself, Aralys, you're making waves. Good, she replied, meeting his gaze with defiant eyes. Waves are exactly what we need. He nodded, the barest hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Just make sure you don't drown us all in the process. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Back in the classroom, the atmosphere was charged with an electric tension. The students were waiting, their eyes reflecting a mix of fear, hope, and just a hint of rebellion. All right, class, Aralys greeted, trying to keep her voice light despite the weight pressing down on her shoulders. Where were we? Oh yes, questioning authority and causing general chaos. Thrax's tentacles twitched with barely contained energy. We've been talking. We want to know what happens if our leaders are wrong. Xylara chimed in, her voice cool and steady. Some of us think we should be preparing ourselves, not just relying on their decisions. Aralys felt a swell of pride, even as she knew the danger inherent in their words. You're right to question, but remember, not everyone appreciates a revolution, especially the ones in power. But isn't that exactly how you humans survived all these centuries? Xylara asked, her tone pointed and challenging. By questioning and refusing to accept things as they are, Aralys laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no real humor. Pretty much. But it's a risky business. Questioning the wrong people can get you into trouble. We're already in trouble, Thrax pointed out. A rogue planet's headed our way. What's a little more? You've got me there, Aralys admitted. All right, let's plan how to survive our own leaders. The discussion that followed was invigorating, the students throwing out ideas that range from the practical to the absurd, often ending in laughter that was half genuine and half hysterical. As the class came to a close, Aralys felt the familiar tug of uncertainty. The students were right to question, but she knew the risks involved. Change was necessary, but it rarely came without a cost. Remember, she said as they gathered their things to leave, it's not just about surviving the rogue planet. It's about surviving our own stupidity. As they filed out, Aralys wondered if she was doing the right thing. Encouraging them to think for themselves was one thing, but rebellion was an entirely different beast, one that could consume them all if they weren't careful. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. That night, Aralys found herself back at the bar, the dim light and familiar clinking of glasses providing a comforting backdrop to her turbulent thoughts. Lark was already there, nursing a drink with the kind of intensity that suggested she was contemplating the meaning of life, or the lack thereof. You look like you've seen a ghost, Lark remarked as Aralys joined her. Just existential dread, Aralys replied with a shrug. You know, the usual. They fell into easy conversation, the kind that came naturally after years of shared gallows humor and surviving one crisis after another. Aralys found comfort in the companionship, a reminder that no matter how dire things got, she wasn't alone. So, what's the verdict? Lark asked after a while, her tone half mocking, half curious. Are we all doomed? Probably, Arely said, raising her glass in a mock toast. But at least we'll go down swinging. They drank, the burn of the liquor a welcome distraction from the weight of impending cosmic doom. As the night wore on, Arelys found herself feeling more at peace. The world, or rather the universe, was a mess, but it was their mess. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was cleaning up after themselves. Or at least trying to. So, what's our next move? Lark asked as they prepared to leave. Arelys considered the question, her mind a whirlwind of plans and possibilities. We keep pushing, keep questioning, and hope like hell we're not wrong. Sounds like a plan, Lark said with a chuckle. Or at least the start of one. With that, they stepped out into the corridor, the weight of the universe still pressing down but somehow feeling a little lighter for the shared burden. And as they walked, side by side, Arelys couldn't help but feel a sense of grim determination. Whatever happened next, they would face it head-on, irreverent and unyielding to the very end. The tension in the classroom was palpable, a cocktail of excitement and fear that buzzed like faulty wiring. Arely stood at the front, arms crossed in a way that said she'd seen it all, even if everything was spiraling into chaos. The holographic board flickered as if it was having a nervous breakdown of its own. In a way, it set the right mood. "All right, class," she began, her voice cutting through the chatter like a laser through butter. "Let's address the elephant in the room. Or should I say the rogue planet in the room?" A ripple of laughter, mostly the nervous kind, ran through the students. Thrax, ever the spokesperson for sarcasm, raised a mossy hand. "Isn't it more like a cosmic elephant stampeding towards us?" "Yeah." Xylara chipped in, her scales catching the dim light as she leaned forward. "And here we are trying to figure out if poking it with a stick is a good idea." Arelys couldn't help but chuckle. "Exactly. And that's why we need a plan. Preferably one that doesn't end with us as cosmic roadkill." The students exchanged glances, a silent debate raging between them. It was a heady mix of fear and defiance, the kind that typically led to revolutions or very bad decisions, or both. Thrax cleared his throat, his mossy visage a study in seriousness. "So what do we do if the powers that be aren't, well, up to the task?" "Good question," Arelys replied, nodding approvingly. "And it's the same question humans have asked every time someone decided it was a bright idea to ignore the obvious, like Earth being flat." Xylara asked with a wry grin. "Exactly," Arelys said, pointing at her like she just handed over the secret to surviving the apocalypse. "And just like those early humans, we need to start preparing for what might go wrong, so we're on our own then?" Thrax asked, his voice laced with the kind of resignation that suggested he'd already seen how this movie ended in a pile of rubble and regret. Arelys shrugged. "Not entirely. We've got each other." And a healthy dose of skepticism. Xylara leaned back, her scales gleaming like polished cobalt. "Skepticism's a good start, but it won't stop a planet." "True," Arelys conceded, "but it might keep us from making dumb decisions. Like trusting that someone else has it all figured out." The room fell into a contemplative silence, the kind that was ripe with potential and peril. Arelys watched them closely, her heart pounding with a mixture of pride and dread. She was walking a tightrope, and the fall on either side promised to be spectacularly messy. "You know," she said, breaking the silence, "every great story starts with someone deciding to question the narrative. Maybe this is our story." The students nodded, some with enthusiasm, others with the kind of reluctance that implied they weren't entirely sold on playing the part of the rebellious hero just yet. "Class dismissed," Arelys announced, offering them a reassuring smile that probably didn't reach her eyes. "But remember, sometimes the ones who survive are those who refuse to play by the rules." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. After the students filed out, leaving behind an atmosphere crackling with potential insurrection, Arelys found herself alone with her thoughts. They weren't pleasant company. The comm device on her desk beeped, a sound she was beginning to associate with bad news and bureaucratic nonsense. Sure enough, it was Graves again. "Briefing in 10" was all the message said. short, sweet, and devoid of any comforting details. Great, she thought. Another round of doom and gloom with a side of strategic indecision. The briefing room was as inviting as a dentist's waiting room and about as cheerful. Graves was already there, glaring at the holographic display like it had personally insulted his mother. Several other officials sat around the table, each wearing expressions that suggested they'd already given up on sleep and sanity. Arelys, Graves said with a nod that was more of a twitch. "Glad you could join us. Wouldn't miss it for the world," she replied, taking a seat. "Or the lack thereof if things go south." Graves managed a grimace that might have been a smile in a brighter universe. "We've got a situation, don't we always?" Arelys quipped, leaning back as if she were on a beach rather than in the midst of an existential crisis. Words spreading, Graves continued, ignoring her jab. "Your students are less than thrilled with the current lack of leadership." Arelys sighed, a weary sound that spoke volumes. "Kids these days, always wanting to think for themselves." One of the energy bureaucrats piped up, her voice a nasal whine that grated on Arelys's nerves like nails on a chalkboard. This kind of dissent could destabilize everything. Or it could stabilize it, Arelys countered, by forcing us to face the fact that maybe, just maybe, we don't have all the answers. Graves cut in, his tone a knife edge of authority and exhaustion. "We need to keep things under control. You stirred the pot, now keep it from boiling over." Arelys arched a brow, unimpressed. "Control's a lovely illusion, Graves. But sure, I'll do my best to keep the lid on Pandora's box." The briefing dissolved into back-and-forth arguments, the kind that felt more like a waste of breath than anything else. Arelys tuned out, her mind drifting back to her students and their burgeoning plans for survival. She'd lit a spark, and the question now was whether it would illuminate the path forward or burn everything to the ground. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next day, the classroom was buzzing with an energy that felt like pre-battle jitters. Thrax and Xylara exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of determination and the kind of fear that came from knowing you were stepping off a cliff and hoping you'd sprout wings before you hit the ground. "All right, settle down," Arelys called, her voice cutting through the noise with practiced ease. "I know you've all been busy plotting the universe's most ill-advised rebellion." Thrax chuckled, his tentacles twitching with barely suppressed excitement. "You make it sound like a bad thing," Arelys smirked. "It's only a bad thing if we fail, and I'm not a fan of losing." Xylara leaned forward, her scales shimmering like a living mosaic. "We've been thinking about what you said. About not relying on the powers that be." "Good," Arelys replied, "because waiting around for someone else to save us is a fool's game. And I'm betting we're smarter than that." The students nodded, the kind of unified determination that made Arelys's heart swell with something dangerously close to hope. "So what's the plan?" Thrax asked, his voice eager and just a tad bit rebellious. "First, we need to gather information," Arelys said, ticking off points on her fingers like a seasoned strategist. "Knowledge is power, and right now, we're woefully underpowered." Xylara raised a skeptical brow. "And how do we do that without tipping off the powers that don't approve?" Arelys grinned, a feral expression that promised trouble. "We improvise, just like our ancestors did when they decided to sail off the edge of a flat world." The plan was simple, if not entirely sane. They'd start by tapping into the station's communication networks, using the cover of educational projects to gather intelligence on the rogue planet and any contingency plans, official or otherwise. As the students discussed the logistics, Arelys felt a familiar thrill coursing through her veins. It was reckless, possibly suicidal, but damn if it didn't feel like they were actually doing something. "Remember," she cautioned as the class drew to a close, "don't get caught. We're rebels, not martyrs." The students filed out, energized and determined, leaving Arelys alone with her thoughts once more. She glanced at the flickering holographic board, the image of the rogue planet casting a long shadow over her consciousness. They were playing with fire, and she was all too aware of how easily it could consume them. That evening, Arelys found herself back at the bar, the dark ambience a familiar refuge. Lark was there as expected, her companion through countless crises and questionable life choices. "You look like you've been conspiring," Lark remarked, her tone teasing and just a little bit concerned. "Only a little," Arelys admitted, settling onto the stool beside her. "Trying to save the universe, one bad decision at a time." Lark chuckled, raising her glass in a salute to their shared madness. "Here's to bad decisions, then. May they be as cunning as they are reckless." They lapsed into easy conversation, the kind that comes from shared experiences and a mutual understanding that the universe was a gigantic mess, but it was their mess to deal with. "So, how's the impending doom?" Lark asked after a while, her voice light despite the weight of the topic. "Accelerating," Arelys replied, finishing her drink with a grimace. "But we're working on it." "Well, causing chaos mostly. But you know, same difference," Lark nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You think they'll listen?" "The powers that be probably not," Arelys said with a shrug, "but we're not relying on them anymore. We're improvising." Lark raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Ah, the infamous human tradition." "Exactly," Arelys agreed, feeling a surge of determination. "We've been winging it since we figured out fire." They sat in companionable silence, the kind where words were unnecessary, each lost in their thoughts about what lay ahead. The rogue planet loomed large in their minds, a threat that was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was the kind of challenge that could define them for better or worse. And as they left the bar and walked down the dimly lit corridor, Arelys felt a fierce resolve settle over her. They'd face whatever came next head on, armed with nothing but their wits and a stubborn refusal to go quietly into the night. Because in the end, that was the human way. Embrace the chaos, laugh in the face of doom, and hope that somehow, amidst the madness, they'd find a way to survive. The classroom was quieter than a condemned man's last meal, with the students staring at Arelys like she was serving up the world's worst dessert: uncertainty. She paced back and forth, a restless energy that made her feel like a caged tiger, or maybe a disgruntled house cat. The rogue planet was getting closer, like an uninvited guest who also happens to be a pyromaniac. Every day brought it nearer, the sky a constant reminder that things could very well go to hell in a handbasket woven by indifferent gods. Arelys didn't know what was worse, the apocalyptic dread hanging over her, or the fact that her students seemed all too eager to embrace the chaos. Thrax, with his ever-sarcastic tongue and mossy hand, was practically vibrating with anticipation. Xylara sat next to him, her scales shifting with the kind of anxious excitement that made Arelys wish she had a better poker face. "All right, everyone settle down," Arelys said, though her voice was more resigned than commanding. "I know we're all keen to kick fate in the teeth, but we need to focus on keeping those teeth from biting us first." Thrax raised his hand, not bothering to wait for permission to speak. "So what's the plan? Run like hell or stand and fight?" "Neither," Arelys shot back, her tone as dry as the last desert on a dying planet. "We're going to think and then, well, then we might run like hell." Xylara's scales rippled as she leaned forward. "How long do we have before things go from bad to uncomfortably worse?" "Days," Arelys replied, her voice as grim as her expression. "The rogue planet's got all the subtlety of a drunk rhino and it's heading right for us." Thrax chuckled, though there was little humor in it. "Well, if we're all going to die, at least we can say we had front-row seats to the universe's worst fireworks display." "Yeah, except with the fireworks," Arelys muttered, rubbing her temples as if that could somehow relieve the pressure building inside her skull. The holographic board flickered, displaying all the pertinent data, charts, numbers, and the kind of optimistic projections that were about as trustworthy as a politician's promise. Despite the grim prognosis, the students were undeterred, their youthful bravado both inspiring and terrifying. "Here's the deal," Arelys began, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "The city's got defenses, but they are about as well maintained as a teenager's room. We've got to figure out what still works and what needs a kickstart. And if the whole system's a dud, Thrax asked, an eyebrow arched with skeptical curiosity. Then we improvise, Arales replied with a smile that was more teeth than warmth. We're human after all. Improvisation's in our DNA, right next to stubbornness and poor decision-making. The students nodded, a mixture of acceptance and resignation. They were ready to act, even if the plan wasn't foolproof, especially because it wasn't foolproof. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk later, Arales found herself wandering the corridors of the city, each step echoing her own internal conflict. She passed by the people she was supposed to protect, their faces etched with worry, hope, and a touch of defiance. They were a resilient lot, these humans, even if they were often stupidly optimistic. Her comm beeped, a sound that now had the uncanny ability to make her stomach flip. It was another message from Graves. Of course it was. Update was all it said. Arales sighed, wishing she could update Graves with a magical solution. But magic was in short supply these days, right alongside chocolate and good common sense. She typed back a quick reply, working on it, like building a sandcastle in a hurricane. The city looked like it was preparing for a parade, albeit a very somber one. People bustled about, securing everything that could be secured, locking down what couldn't, and generally pretending like they had more control than they actually did. It was the human condition in a nutshell. Act first, think later, and pray the universe was feeling generous. Arales stopped by a viewing deck, watching the stars wink down at her, indifferent as ever. The rogue planet lurked in the distance, a malicious blot against the cosmic backdrop. It seemed to pulse with a life of its own, daring them to stand in its way. "Beautiful, isn't it?" came a voice from behind her. She turned to find Lark leaning against the railing, her expression a curious blend of awe and sarcasm. "If you like your beauty on the destructive side," Arales replied, gesturing at the rogue planet. "Bit like admiring a shark for its teeth." "Those teeth are getting closer," Lark noted, her tone more serious now. "You really think we can stop it?" Arales shrugged, a gesture as full of meaning as it was empty of certainty. "Maybe, maybe not, but we're sure as hell going to try." Lark nodded, accepting Arales's answer in the way only a true friend could. "Guess that's all any of us can do." They stood in silence, watching the rogue planet inch ever closer. It was a living reminder that the universe was vast, uncaring, and more than capable of chewing them up and spitting them out without a second thought. But even in the face of such existential terror, Arales felt a flicker of hope. They had each other, and sometimes that was enough. Or at least it would have to be. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The classroom was a hive of activity the next day, the students buzzing with energy and purpose. Arales watched them work, each group tackling a different aspect of their impromptu crisis management plan. There was a strange beauty in their determination, a kind of reckless bravery that made her want to laugh and cry in equal measure. Thrax was knee-deep in an analysis of the city's defense systems, muttering to himself about outdated code and the general incompetence of whoever was in charge of maintenance. Xylara, meanwhile, was coordinating their efforts, her calm exterior belying the turmoil that Arales knew simmered underneath. "All right, team," Arales called out, drawing their attention. "What have we got?" Thrax looked up from his screen, his expression a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "Well, the good news is some of this tech is so old it predates most of our parents. Bad news, it might actually be older than time itself. We're talking prehistoric levels of neglect." "Great," Arales replied, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. "So we're relying on relics to save our sorry hides." "Pretty much," Thrax confirmed. "But if we can get the power grid up and running at full capacity, we might be able to reroute enough energy to keep the shield stable." Xylara chimed in, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "And I've been working on the communication systems. We should be able to coordinate with other cities, see if we can't get a unified defense going." Arales nodded, impressed despite herself. They were pulling together, making things happen even when the universe seemed intent on unraveling around them. It was a testament, or maybe a warning about the power of human tenacity. "All right, keep at it," Arely said, clapping her hands for emphasis. "And remember, if we fail, we'll just have to come up with a better plan in the afterlife." The students chuckled, a sound more of defiance than amusement. They were ready to face whatever came next, and Arely felt a swell of pride as she watched them work. They might not have all the answers, but they had each other, and sometimes in the darkest of hours, that was enough to light the way forward. Asterisk, 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 as night fell, Arely found herself back at the bar. It seemed fitting, somehow, to end the day where it had all begun, with a drink and a friend who understood the madness of it all. Lark was already there, nursing a glass of something that looked suspiciously like courage in liquid form. She raised it in greeting as Arely sat down beside her. "How's the rebellion going?" Lark asked, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Surprisingly well," Arely replied, signaling the bartender for her usual. "We've got a plan, sort of. Mostly involves not dying, which I hear is a popular choice." Lark chuckled, her laughter echoing in the dimly lit bar. "Aren't we all just trying to avoid that particular fate?" "Truth," Arely agreed, taking a sip of her drink. It burned on the way down, a welcome distraction from the chaos everywhere else. They fell into easy conversation, the kind that required no effort or pretense. It was a relief, a reminder that even as the world around them teetered on the brink of disaster, some things remained constant. "You ever think we'll get out of this?" Lark asked after a while, her voice thoughtful. Arely shrugged, a gesture both honest and unhelpful. "Depends. On us, on them, on the universe deciding it doesn't hate us as much as it seems to." "Optimistic," Lark teased, but there was a warmth in her tone that belied her words. "Realistic," Arely corrected, though she couldn't help but smile. The rogue planet loomed large in their minds, a dark shadow against the backdrop of their lives. But even as it threatened to swallow them whole, they refused to give in. They were human, after all. Resilient, reckless, and just stubborn enough to believe they could make a difference. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to see them through this darkest hour. The classroom buzzed like a faulty comm device, the students' energy bordering on chaos. Arely surveyed the scene like a captain trying to steer a ship through a storm with a broken rudder. The rogue planet loomed ever larger in their minds, a cosmic reminder of how badly the universe wanted to squash them. Thrax was at the center of the mayhem, gesturing wildly as he explained his latest epiphany to a group of students who looked both skeptical and intrigued. "And if we reverse the polarity of the neutron flow," he said, with all the authority of a 12-year-old who'd just used a science term he'd picked up from an ancient vid, "we should be able to create a feedback loop that stabilizes the shield matrix." Arely rolled her eyes, though she couldn't help but admire his conviction. "You sound like you're auditioning for a part in a low-budget sci-fi flick, Thrax," she called out, crossing her arms. "Plot holes and all." "Hey, it's not like we have a lot of options," Thrax shot back, unfazed. "Besides, desperate times call for desperate technobabble, if you say so." Arely leaned against her desk, trying to suppress the grin tugging at her lips. "All right, everybody, listen up. Thrax might be onto something here. As ridiculous as his plan sounds, it's our best shot. Let's channel our inner mad scientists and see if we can't pull this off." Xylara sidled up next to Thrax, her scales catching the flickering light from the holographic board. "But what if it backfires?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then we'll go out with a bang," Thrax replied, a wry smile playing on his lips. "Literally?" Arely clapped her hands, drawing the students' attention. "Okay, people, let's focus. I want teams on energy rerouting, shield matrix diagnostics, and communications. We're going to make this work, or at least give it a hell of a try." As the students dispersed with newfound purpose, Arely felt a strange sense of pride. Despite the odds, they were facing the challenge head-on, refusing to be cowed by the universe's best attempts at annihilating them. Asterisk, 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 Arely found herself back at the viewing deck, staring out at the chaotic sky. The rogue planet was now visible to the naked eye, an ominous presence that seemed to suck the light from the stars around it. It was a cosmic bully, and Aralise hated it with every fiber of her being. Her calm buzzed, and she glanced down to see a message from Graves. Any progress? Universe isn't getting any friendlier. Her fingers flew over the keypad. Working on a miracle. Deadlines tight. Universe needs to chill. Graves's response was almost instant. I'll send my best vibes. Aralise huffed a laugh. Sure thing, boss. Lark joined her, a contemplative look on her face. You really think we can pull this off? She asked, her tone somewhere between hopeful and resigned. We have to, Aralise replied, watching a shooting star streak across the sky. Humans have survived worse with less. If it's one thing we're good at, it's defying the odds. Well, here's to human stubbornness, Lark said, raising an imaginary glass. Aralise mimed clinking her own glass against Lark's, and to not dying in the most embarrassing way possible. They shared a moment of silence, each lost in thought, before Lark spoke again. So, what's our next move? Aralise's mind raced, running through every possibility, every scrap of knowledge she'd gathered over the years. Then it hit her like the universe's worst punchline. The mines, she said, her voice suddenly alive with possibility. Lark frowned. The mines, aren't they abandoned? Exactly, Aralise replied, excitement building. They've been sealed off for years, but if we can access the geothermal vents underneath, we might be able to generate enough energy to power the shield. It's a long shot, but long shots are kind of our thing, Lark finished, a grin spreading across her face. I like it. Let's get the kids on it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The following day, the classroom was a hive of frantic activity as Aralise outlined her plan. The students listened, their expressions a mix of disbelief and excitement. We need to get into those mines, Aralise said, her voice firm. It's risky, but if we can harness the geothermal energy, it could be the boost we need. Thrax's eyes gleamed with mischief. Breaking into a sealed-off mine sounds like my kind of field trip. Focus, Thrax, Aralise admonished, though she couldn't help but appreciate his enthusiasm. This isn't a game. We need to be smart about this. Zylara raised a hand, her calm demeanor masking the intense focus beneath. How do we get in? The entrances are all but caved in. Aralise nodded, having anticipated the question. We'll need to be creative. Use the scanners to find the least obstructed path and bring the excavation equipment. It's going to be a tight squeeze, but we can make it work. The students nodded, determination etched into their faces. They were ready, willing to take the risks necessary to save their city, their home. All right then, Aralise said, her voice carrying a note of finality. Let's get to work. We're running on borrowed time, and the universe isn't going to wait for us to catch up. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The entrance to the mines was as unwelcoming as Aralise remembered, a gaping maw in the earth that seemed to say, "Enter if you dare." Dust choked the air, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the occasional creak of shifting rock. Aralise led the way, her flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. The students followed, their faces set with determination. Thrax, predictably, was at the front of the pack, his excitement barely contained. Feels like we're in a horror vid, he quipped, his voice echoing off the walls. Don't jinx it, Aralise shot back, though she couldn't help but smile at his irrepressible enthusiasm. Last thing we need is for this place to decide it wants to collapse on our heads. As they ventured deeper, the air grew warmer, the promise of geothermal energy a tantalizing prospect. Aralise paused at a junction, consulting her map. This way, she said, pointing down a narrow tunnel that looked like it had seen better days. Stay close and watch your step. They picked their way over rocks and debris, the darkness pressing in around them like a tangible thing. Despite the precariousness of their journey, Aralise felt a strange sense of calm. They were doing something, fighting back against a universe that seemed hell-bent on their destruction. Eventually, they reached the heart of the mines, a vast chamber filled with the low hum of geothermal activity. The heat was palpable, a living thing that pulsed beneath their feet. Aralise turned to face the students, her expression serious. This is it, she said. We need to set up the conduits and start channeling the energy back to the city. It's going to be tricky, but I have faith in every one of you." Thrax saluted, a cocky grin on his face. "Time to play hero, huh?" "Something like that," Aralees replied, shaking her head fondly. "Let's show the universe what we're made of." The students sprang into action, coordinating their efforts with a precision that belied their youth. As they worked, Aralees couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. This was humanity at its finest, defiant, daring, and a little bit reckless. As the minutes ticked by, the heat intensified, sweat dripping down Aralees's back. The conduits were in place, the last pieces of the puzzle falling into alignment. All that remained was to initiate the energy transfer. "Ready?" Aralees asked, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her stomach. Thrax gave her a thumbs up. "Born ready." Aralees took a deep breath, then activated the controls. For a moment, nothing happened, and she felt a spike of panic. But then, with a deep rumble that reverberated through the chamber, the system roared to life. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and Aralees held her breath as the energy surged through the conduits, a living current that promised salvation. Cheers erupted from the students, their voices a joyous cacophony in the depths of the earth. They'd done it against all odds, they'd done it. For the first time in what felt like forever, Aralees allowed herself to hope. "Let's get back topside," she said, her voice carrying over the noise. "There's still work to be done." The journey back was a blur of triumphant chatter, the students buoyed by their success. Aralees led the way, her heart lighter than it had been in days. As they emerged into the fading light of day, Aralees looked up at the sky, the rogue planet a dark blot in the heavens. It was still there, still a threat, but for the first time they had a fighting chance. The students gathered around her, their eyes alight with possibility. They were ready to face whatever came next, united in purpose and determination. Aralees met their gazes, her own filled with a fierce resolve. "We've taken the first step," she said. "Now let's finish this." Their cheers echoed in the air, a defiant cry against the encroaching dark. They were human, and they would fight, not just to survive, but to live. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. As Aralees and the students returned topside, the air was electric with the kind of energy only a bunch of teenagers on the brink of disaster could muster. Aralees inhaled deeply, savoring the half-burnt smell of hope mingling with the dust. The rogue planet loomed overhead, still very much a problem, but at least they weren't all immediately dead. Achieving the bare minimum now felt like a win. Thrax was the first to break the silence, naturally. "You think the universe notices when a bunch of nobodies flips it off like we did down there?" Aralees snorted, adjusting her goggles. "The universe is busy counting all the middle fingers humanity's given it over the centuries. We're just a footnote, a particularly rude footnote." Their laughter mingled with the rustle of wind over the desolate landscape. The city, a cacophony of mismatched architecture and frenzied tech, lay ahead, still clinging to the cliff of existence by its fingernails. Zylara, ever the voice of pragmatic concern, spoke up. "So what's next, Aralees? We might have bought ourselves some time, but that planet isn't just going to pack up and leave 'cause we yelled at it real loud." Aralees sighed, her eyes on the horizon where sparks of activity were visible even from their vantage point. "We need to get the shield matrix fully operational, and we'll need to coordinate with the rest of the city's defense systems. It's all about the boring stuff now, logistics, power management, making sure no one accidentally trips over a cable and screws us all." Thrax grinned. "I love the smell of bureaucracy in the morning." Aralees chuckled. "If bureaucracy had a smell, it'd be like stale coffee and despair." They trekked back to the city, the rogue planet a constant reminder overhead like an overbearing mother-in-law. The atmosphere in the classroom shifted from frantic chaos to something resembling disciplined anarchy. Aralees had to admit, they were a ragtag bunch, but they were her ragtag bunch, and that made them worth more than gold, at least in this doomed corner of the galaxy. Aralees gathered the students around the malfunctioning holographic board. It flickered uncertainly, like it was contemplating quitting its job and moving to a nice farm upstate. But it held on, displaying the sprawling network of systems and contingencies that would, fingers crossed, keep them all alive. All right, team, here's the rundown. Our geothermal boost is in place. Now we just need to make sure the shield matrix is stable. Thrax, you and Xylara are on diagnostic duty. Make sure it doesn't decide to go on strike halfway through. Thrax saluted with exaggerated flourish. Tech support hotline is online, boss. Xylara rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. At least if it fails spectacularly, we'll know who to blame. That's the spirit, Arely said dryly. Now, the rest of you, I need eyes on communications. The comm device is a diva and needs constant reassurance it's the most important piece of tech in the room. Lark, who had been leaning against the wall with her usual air of detached amusement, finally spoke up. So, in other words, we're improvising. Arely shrugged. Improvisation is just planning without the hassle of commitment. A collective chuckle rippled through the group. Arely felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with imminent planetary destruction. It was camaraderie, or maybe a mild heart attack. The afternoon bled into evening, the sky a tapestry of impending doom. Arely coordinated the efforts, barking orders and offering encouragement with equal measure. The shield matrix was a temperamental beast, prone to tantrums and power surges that would have made an angsty teenager proud. Thrax and Xylara worked side by side, their fingers dancing over the controls with the kind of ease that comes from knowing you're one mistake away from absolute catastrophe. Their banter was a steady stream of sarcasm and technobabble, a language all of its own. So, you ever think we're just delaying the inevitable? Thrax asked, soldering something that probably shouldn't have needed soldering. Xylara shrugged, her eyes on the flickering readouts. We're all just marking time until the universe decides to unfollow us. Might as well make it interesting. Interesting. Right. That's what I'm going for in my final moments, Thrax muttered, a wry grin tugging at his lips. Meanwhile, Arely navigated the labyrinthine defense protocols like a seasoned captain steering a ship through a storm. The comm device shrieked occasionally, demanding more attention than Arely was willing to give. It was a temperamental piece of junk, but it was theirs, and that was enough. As night fell, the city seemed to hold its breath, the tension palpable in the air. Arely gathered the students one last time, their faces illuminated by the glow of screens and hope. This is it, Arely said, her voice steady. We're going to engage the shield matrix. If it works, we've bought ourselves time. If it doesn't, well, we've had a good run. Thrax raised a hand, his expression uncharacteristically serious. Just so we're clear, if this fails, I'm blaming you. Arely grinned. As long as you do it posthumously. The laughter was nervous, but it was real, and that was what mattered. Together they initiated the sequence, the shields humming to life with a sound that resonated deep in their bones. For a moment, nothing happened. The universe held its breath, the rogue planet a sullen presence in the sky. Arely felt her heart stutter, the weight of what-ifs pressing down on her. But then, with a flicker and a surge of energy, the shield matrix engaged, casting a faint glow over the city. The students erupted in cheers, their voices echoing across the streets. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd done it. Arely allowed herself a moment to bask in their triumph before the comm device beeped, demanding attention. Graves's voice crackled through the speaker, tired but hopeful. Arely, tell me you've got good news. Arely allowed herself a rare moment of levity. The city's still here, Graves. Hope you've got something stronger than coffee to celebrate with. There was a pause, then laughter. That's the best news I've heard all day. Keep it up, Arely. She ended the call, turning to face the students. They were buzzing with energy, a ragtag band of misfits who'd defied their own leaders and the universe itself. What now? Lark asked, her arms crossed but her eyes bright. Now, Arely said, resting her hands on her hips, we keep doing what we do best, surviving. And maybe, just maybe, we'll teach the universe a thing or two about human stubbornness. Thrax couldn't resist a parting shot. So, same time tomorrow. Or do we get a day off for saving everyone's asses? Arelys laughed, the sound mingling with the chatter of hopeful voices. If the universe decides to give us a break, you'll be the first to know, Thrax. As they dispersed into the night, Arelys watched them go, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. They defied expectations, turned the tide, and in doing so, had reminded her of why she'd taken this thankless job in the first place. The rogue planet was still out there, a lurking threat on the horizon, but for now, they'd live to fight another day. Arelys looked up at the sky, the stars twinkling defiantly against the darkness. "Here's to not dying of cosmic stupidity," she murmured, raising an imaginary glass to the heavens. She turned back to the city, where lights danced in the streets and laughter echoed off the walls. They'd fought, they'd survived, and in the grand scheme of things, maybe that was enough. As she made her way home, Arelys carried with her the knowledge that no matter what happened next, they were ready. Come hell or high water, they'd face it head-on, as they always had, together. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real miracle all along. The city was still here, a fact that seemed as precarious as a politician's promise. Arelys watched her ragtag bunch of students disperse into the night, their laughter echoing like the universe's cruel jest. The rogue planet, now a sullen backdrop, hovered above them as an eternal reminder of their impending doom or the world's worst home decor. Either way, it wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. Arelys leaned against the malfunctioning comm device, its lights blinking erratically like a disco ball having a seizure. It was a reminder of the chaos they'd just survived, or more aptly, the chaos they'd merely postponed. The universe had thrown them a cosmic curveball, and somehow they'd managed to bunt. With any luck, they'd keep bunting until they forgot the rules of the game entirely. Thrax sidled up, a smirk playing on his lips. "So, Arelys, now that we've got our collective asses out of the fire, what's next on our agenda? A dance-off with the aliens, perhaps?" "Assuming they have anything resembling rhythm," Arelys replied dryly. "But hey, maybe we've set a precedent. Humans and rogues working together, proving that disaster is the best kind of bonding experience." Thrax chuckled, glancing skyward. "Think they'll give us a medal for this, or at least a nice try ribbon?" Arelys shook her head. "More like a you tried sticker. But don't worry, I'll make sure yours is gold." Lark joined them, her arms crossed, eyes sizing up the after-action mess with a detached amusement. "We might not get medals, but at least we've got stories for the grandkids. Assuming any of us survive long enough to have grandkids." Arelys snorted. "I'm sure they'll love the tale of how Grandma once yelled at a planet and lived to tell the tale." Really gets the bedtime juices flowing. As the laughter faded, Arelys looked around at her team. Xylara was still fiddling with the shield matrix, her face a mask of concentration. The rest of the students were buzzing with a mixture of relief and lingering adrenaline. For a moment, she wondered if they realized what they'd accomplished, not just surviving, but doing so with a certain reckless flair that only humans could muster. "Listen up, everyone," Arelys called out, drawing their attention. "I know the universe has been actively trying to murder us, but we've pulled through. Now we get to decide what kind of world we're living in tomorrow." Xylara looked up from her work, a wry grin on her lips. "As long as the world in question isn't flat, I'm on board." Thrax raised an eyebrow. "Flat, round, dodecahedron, does it really matter? Last I checked, our survival rate doesn't care about the shape." "True," Arelys said, "but it does care about cooperation. If we can get our act together with the aliens, maybe we stand a chance of not just surviving but thriving." "I know, crazy idea." Lark rolled her eyes. "Wow, optimistic much. You should get that checked." "Hey, I can dream, can't I?" Arelys replied with mock indignation. "Dream big, fail spectacularly, that's the human way." The group chuckled, the sound carrying over the ruins of their not-so-perfect world. It was a ragged, hopeful kind of laughter, the kind that suggested that, while the universe might have it out for them, they'd at least go down swinging and flipping it off in the process. Arelys turned back to the flickering holographic board. now displaying a tentative alliance of symbols and data. The city had survived not just because of tech and tenacity, but because desperation was a universal language, one they'd managed to translate into something resembling cooperation. "All right," Arely said, her voice firm. "We focus on the now. First up, restoring trust with our alien neighbors. They might not have been on our holiday card list, but if we're going to keep this cosmic dance going, we need all the partners we can get," Thrax snorted. "Yeah, because nothing screams trust me like launching a bunch of energy shields. I'm sure they'll be thrilled." Xylara chimed in. "Well, nothing says sorry like stabilizing a planetary shield, right? We'll win them over with our witty charm and stunning incompetence." Arely's grinned. "Exactly. We can be the poster children for humans, making it up as we go along." As they strategized, the night wore on, the sky above them a patchwork of stars and distant threats. The rogue planet was still there, a quiet reminder of the stakes, but for once it felt like it was on their side, or at least not actively plotting their demise. The next day, Arely's and her team stood at the edge of the city, ready to face the interstellar neighbors with whom they'd been forced to share living space. The alien delegation arrived with little fanfare, their sleek ships gliding silently over the landscape like disapproving teachers. Their leader, a tall figure with too many limbs and not enough patience, approached with measured steps. "Greetings," Arely's began, her tone carefully neutral. "We're glad you could make it. I promise today's agenda includes far less planetary peril." The alien leader tilted its head, multiple eyes blinking in eerie synchronicity. "Humans and their penchant for chaos, it is fascinating," Thrax muttered under his breath. "Pretty sure that's alien for annoying." Arely's elbowed him lightly. "Focus," she hissed, then turned back to the alien with a smile that barely concealed her nerves. "We're hoping to build something more stable, a little less reactive, a little more cooperative." The alien made a sound that might have been a laugh, or maybe it was just trying not to sneeze. "Your shield matrix has proven effective. We are intrigued." "Intrigued is good," Arely's replied. "Intrigued is better than about to vaporize us, so I'll take it." Xylara stepped forward, her voice filled with the kind of confidence that comes from having nothing left to lose. "We've managed to cobble together something that holds, and we'd like to share our findings. Work together, make sure we're all on the same page before any more cosmic surprises." The alien leader seemed to consider this, its gaze drifting to the students who hovered behind. "You seek to integrate our technologies," Arely's nodded. "We do. And maybe in doing so, we can come up with a plan that doesn't involve us all getting obliterated by some rogue planet or cosmic hiccups." The alien leader studied her for a long moment, then nodded, a gesture that Arely's chose to interpret as hopeful rather than ominous. "Very well, we will discuss this further. But know this, human, the universe does not favor those who refuse to adapt." "Good thing we're quick learners then," Arely said, offering a smile that was as much defiance as it was diplomacy. With that, the alien delegation departed, leaving Arely's and her group standing in the shadow of the rogue planet. The encounter had been brief, tense, but ultimately promising. A tentative alliance had been formed, one that might just tip the scales in favor of survival. "Well," Thrax said, breaking the silence, "that went better than expected. No vaporization, no immediate threats. I'd call that a win." Lark nodded, her arms still crossed but her expression softer. "Let's hope it sticks. I'd rather not have to fight our way through another planetary crisis." Xylara sighed, a sound of weary hopefulness. "Well, at least we've shown them that humans can do more than just mess things up. We can fix them too." Arely's chuckled. "Even if we do it with all the grace of a blindfolded giraffe on a unicycle." As they returned to the city, plans were set in motion for future cooperation. The holographic board, once a symbol of their desperation, now displayed a roadmap to a future built on collaboration. Screens flashed with potential resources, potential threats, and most importantly, potential allies. In the days that followed, Aralys's teaching spread beyond the classroom. Her students, once a chaotic band of misfits, became ambassadors of a new kind of diplomacy, one built on understanding, irreverence, and the kind of stubbornness that could only come from facing the end of the world and laughing in its face. The city transformed, its mismatched architecture and frenzied tech becoming a testament to human adaptability. The rogue planet, though still a looming threat, became a lesson in resilience, a constant reminder of the stakes, but also of the potential for growth and unity. Under Aralys's guidance, the shield matrix became more than just a defense system. It became a symbol of cooperation, a blending of technologies and ideas that transcended the boundaries of species and planets. Thrax and Xylara, once just students, now led teams of mixed-species engineers, their banter a universal language understood by all. Amidst it all, Aralys found herself at the center of this new world, a reluctant leader whose cynicism was only matched by her belief in the power of human perseverance. She watched as her students, no, her comrades, embraced the chaos and turned it into something extraordinary. The nights were still long, the threats still present, but hope had found a foothold in their world. And as Aralys looked out at the city she'd helped save, she couldn't help but wonder what other miracles they might achieve. "Here's to not just surviving," she murmured to herself, raising an imaginary glass to the heavens once more, "but to thriving against all odds. Bring it on, universe." And as she turned to face the future, Aralys knew that whatever came next, they were ready. United, defiant, and armed with nothing more than wits and stubbornness, they would continue to face the cosmos head-on. After all, they were humans. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was flipping the universe the bird and carrying on regardless.